somebody had to win and somebody had to lose. That's the way sports goes. But two teams came into Auburn's Neville Arena desperate for a win, and the home team gets it done. Auburn wins a very close game, 75-74. In the closing seconds of the game, a very angry Mark Pope, a very happy Stephen Pearl, and a physical matchup on the plains in the jungle. Welcome to Southeast Sports Plus. I'm Gerhard Mathangani, joined by Patrick Walsh. Patrick, we talked about this last week from a number of perspectives, knowing that this game was going to be very important for Auburn because Auburn was staring maybe on the outside looking in of the NCAA tournament. Kentucky feels safe, but they were treading water, and this is a huge one for the Tigers.
Yeah, and I really do think that before this game, Auburn was out of the tournament.
Yeah.
Just because of that 5-game losing streak that they went on. The Mississippi State loss really kind of sealed that for me. And before the Mississippi State game, I said that this game between Kentucky and Auburn was more important for Kentucky just because I thought Auburn was going to win that game. And then Josh Hubbard just went nuclear in that one, dropped 46 points, I believe.
Right.
And so then it just made this game mean all that much more to both of these teams. And I think we were treated to a really, really good basketball game on the court. And you could tell that both of these teams were jockeying for positioning in the NCAA tournament. As we mentioned, Auburn probably on the outside. I think that they're definitely back in the tournament as of right now. But all of a sudden, it feels like we were talking about this Kentucky team 1 week ago today after the loss to Florida.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, you lose a tough one on the road. I believe it was a 9-point loss to the Gators. But you got to just put that behind you at this point and move forward. And all of a sudden, it just looks like this Kentucky team is starting to fall back into the slump that we were talking about them being in the beginning of the SEC.
Yeah, and it's shades of what we saw earlier for Kentucky when we had our friends on, Colby Wilson and others saying, talking about things like effort. And it might not be effort now, it might just be mindset where this team is mentally because they're getting it out of their star. Tago Owe was great in the game, but for Auburn, it seems like, hey, they're finding ways to come away with the big plays. It felt like almost every 50-50 ball went to Auburn. It felt like the offensive rebounds. I know that on the glass, Kentucky won the glass, but the last offensive rebound of the game was the most important one for the Auburn Tigers. They ended up getting it done. It feels like Auburn had to grind it out. And not that Kentucky wasn't there to grind it out. It just, whenever there was a time to make a play, they just couldn't make it.
Yeah, and honestly, sometimes when you're on this losing streak and your stars are showing up, sometimes it takes guys to really make a name for themselves. And Keyshawn Murphy, I mean, he had easily the best game he's ever had in an Auburn Tiger uniform. 25 points. It's his third double-double in the last 5 games. 25 points, 10 rebounds. I mean, we'd been talking about Keyshawn, and he was really good at being a glass cleaner.
Yes.
But all of a sudden, he just explodes for 25 points in this one, and it was really a shock to me that it wasn't the other Keyshawn and Keyshawn Hall that stepped up.
Right.
It wasn't Philip Jovich. It wasn't Todd Pettiford. It was Keyshawn Murphy that said, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to take this into my own hands. And really, I almost want to say he's saved Auburn's season right now.
Yeah.
Because it really does feel like that.
Yeah, certainly. And like you said, he was great both scoring, also on the glass, had the double-double. Elijah Freeman was the hero overall, put in that second tip in, but they're not even in that position without Keyshawn Murphy's efforts in this game. We did get a chance to hear from Stephen Pearl because this game was very, very physical. We'll talk about this on the backside of the soundbite, but this game was very physical. Mark Pope had a lot to say about the officiating. Here's Coach Stephen Pearl after the game.
Yeah, I mean, our guys did a great job of bouncing back. I think it's been a pretty interesting slate up to this point. And I don't ever want to say that we've been unlucky. But if you look at some of the performances that opposing players have had, especially from 3, I think we've had 11 or 12 guys since conference play has started that have either matched their season highs or had a season high in 3-point makes against us. And a lot of those guys are guys that are like shooting 28 to 32% from 3 at the time. And then, obviously Hubbard goes ballistic and has 46, and then he goes 4 for 20 tonight at South Carolina. So about threw up my lunch when I watched that. So to answer your question, I think our guys have done a good job of recognizing that we've been a little unlucky in some of these games, because that's how we have to defend. We can't not be in gaps because teams would be too good getting to the rim and finishing through contact. And tonight was probably the first time that the numbers actually went back into our favor as far as teams not making open shots. Kentucky goes 6 for 23. They shoot like 36%, I think, from three. So finally, we had one go our way, which was great. And then KO was in a stance, and KO's back's to me, so I didn't see the play, but looked like he extended his arms, and we got the offensive foul, so we were able to get the ball back and did a great job of getting an inside touch so we could at least have the opportunity to get an offensive rebound. And then we kind of knew what they were going to run at the end of the game. We saw Marino do it against LSU, so he almost caught it again, and fortunately he kind of bobbled it, and we were able to win the game.
5-game losing streak will really hurt any player and or coach. It felt like after this one ended, Stephen Pearl almost breathed a huge sigh of relief. How big was this one, in your opinion, for coach himself?
I mean, I don't want to say some people were already saying, hey, why don't we go ahead and try to find a new coach? Mm-hmm. And I didn't think that he was on the hot seat by any means.
Right.
I mean, definitely with a roster of this magnitude, having a guy return in Todd Pettiford who's supposed to step up and be a star this year. He's had some trouble off the court with his discipline, and some other guys also have had trouble with their discipline.
Right.
But this one feels so big for Stephen Pearl because it at least silences some of the doubters. Mm-hmm. And I still always thought that he was going to get at least 3 years, let him get some of his guys. Remember, this is basically Bruce Pearl's team. And Stephen Pearl just ended up taking over. So once Stephen Pearl, not saying that this team isn't talented by any means, but once Stephen Pearl starts to be able to recruit some of his guys and the guys that he wants to fit his system, I think then we're going to start to see the benefits of that. But it at least silences some of those doubters of him, because a lot of people were like, okay, he was the chosen one to follow up Bruce Pearl. And right now, Auburn's in a spot that they haven't been in quite some time.
Yeah, no question. Now spinning this thing forward, it looks like for Auburn, you had them out of the tournament. I think that they were teetering there on the surface. It may be a first four team that had to go out to Dayton to start their tournament. I think after this win, they're probably firmly in, according to a lot of people. I know Joe Lenardi has them in. I think Andy Katz also does too. People who know the way that this committee works. You see their resume there. In all, I mean, I think that they're in right now. I'm not sure how bad it could be in the last couple games of the regular season, but it feels like right now they're in.
Here's what I'll say about this. You could not justify – don't get me wrong. They were probably out of the tournament picture after the Mississippi State game.
Right.
But you cannot justify to me if Missouri makes the tournament and Auburn doesn't.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can justify that, because Missouri, I believe, right now sits at like 66 in the net.
Yeah.
Auburn never dropped below 34
right.
in the last few weeks. So there's a big difference there. I will say both Missouri and Auburn have big wins over Florida.
Right.
Although Auburn's looks more impressive because it seems like Florida started to figure it out after they played Auburn. After Florida lost to Missouri, there were still a few hiccups there. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, Auburn's Florida's last loss. And since then,
yes,
they have looked like a top 8 team, and they sit at 7th right now in the AP poll. So I think if we're going to be looking back here in about a few weeks from now on Selection Sunday and we see Auburn in the tournament, it's a big piece is going to be because of that win at Florida.
Yeah, it's huge. And not to mention the number one strength of schedule, the number one in the entire country is Auburn. And so they played the hardest schedule, and as you mentioned, they picked up a win. It's one thing I know the committee likes when you play hard games, and they almost reward you for playing more hard games. Right. We're seeing what's happening right now with Miami, Ohio, and there's chatter that the undefeated team might not get in this whole thing. But so the committee rewards teams for playing and scheduling those tough games. But like you mentioned, they ended up getting a win at Florida, which I think is huge, and then this win over Kentucky, I think firmly puts them in there as well. And we'll see what the committee does here in the next couple of weeks going into this matchup. Meanwhile, on the other side for Kentucky, this one it seems to me that I want to believe. I think I believe in Kentucky's potential. I think I believe their high end. I just haven't seen their high end consistently enough to really believe that this team can really make a deep run in the tournament.
When this team is on, they are easily, without a doubt, in the top 15 in the country.
Right.
It's just sometimes they'll play these really good games, and then they'll follow it up with some games that makes you really question, hey, is this team really worth $22 million? Mm-hmm. It's just so weird, and it's the same thing that we saw with Kansas last year. I know I keep on making the parallels here, but it really does feel like this is exactly the same story that was surrounding the Kansas team last year. Paid all that money, got Hunter Dickinson to come back, was preseason Big 12 Player of the Year. This year, Otega Owe was a preseason SEC Player of the Year. And it just hasn't really worked out on a consistent enough basis here for Mark Pope. And it feels really weird because Otega Owe is having these good games.
He's playing very well. Yeah.
29 points.
Yeah.
But they've lost 3 in a row. It's just, again, it goes back to what I was saying last week after, I believe it was the Georgia game, where it just feels like Mark Pope is trying to justify him. I don't know what he's doing, but it feels like he's making the wrong decisions at the wrong time.
Right.
It just, whatever the opposite of Jay Johnson is, because Jay Johnson seems to make the right decision at the right time.
Yeah.
Mark Pope just keeps on pressing the buttons, and it's almost having an inverse effect.
Right. This game was tight all the way through. No team had a double-digit lead. I think Kentucky's largest lead was 9. Auburn's largest lead was 6. Auburn ends up winning it by 1. So this game was very tight all the way through. So, of course, when it's tight all the way through, everybody doesn't point to the 5 players that can control the outcome of the game. They want to point to the 3 officials. Mark Pope did that without doing that. He said in his press conference a lot of times he doesn't want to get fined there after the game. But here's a very frustrated Mark Pope after the game.
Well, we're not allowed to talk about the referees, but you guys saw it, and I think sometimes it's just super personal. And so I'm not allowed to comment on the referees. I won't comment on the referees. And it's unfortunate that, just unfortunate. So it didn't cost us the game. We're in control of the game, so we'll find ways to go win.
Wow.
He was unbelievable what he overcame and who he overcame tonight. A lot of times it felt like he was playing, 1-on-7, 1-on-8. Sometimes that happens. I thought he was brilliant. I thought our guys attacked it great, and we just came up short. We need to make one more play. We didn't make enough plays. Credit to Auburn.
Mark Pope was very cautious with his words when he was in front of the microphone, basically saying that he couldn't criticize the officiating. But then afterwards, there was a few reporters that were still rolling, and he stands up, goes into the corridor, and says things we couldn't even air anyways, even if we did have the sound, about the officiating. It felt like a message, an intentional message to the league.
It felt like an intentional message to the league, and it almost feels like his frustrations of how this season have gone.
Yeah.
It started to boil over, and he's feeling the heat. You're
Right.
going to feel the heat when you've lost the amount of games that Kentucky has this year at Kentucky, because Big Blue Nation doesn't expect to lose, isn't used to losing. It's almost like what Kalen DeBoer got in year 1 as the Alabama head coach. They're not used to not making the playoffs,
Right.
so you're going to hear it. And Kentucky, I think they're still in the NCAA tournament right now. They've got a few more games where, if you lose at South Carolina, I do not expect them to by any means. But South Carolina just put up 97 points against Mississippi State on Saturday. If you lose at South Carolina, all of a sudden that pressure just starts to really build up. I think they're out of the picture. Honestly, if they lose South Carolina, I don't know how you can justify this team still being in the NCAA tournament, even with the wins that they have. So he's definitely feeling the pressure right now, and I think it just sort of boiled over there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And so they'll look to get back on their feet and end this 3-game losing skid. Auburn ends their 5-game losing skid as